In Hollywood, not all that glitters is golden. Some legends cast long, cold shadows. Behind the smiles, behind the awards, and behind the perfectly delivered lines, there are unspoken tensions that never make it into interviews or memoirs, only whispered about in hallways, if at all. What happens when the most respected man on set quietly warns others, not with scandalous accusations, but with calm honesty that's too subtle to be believed? And why do those warnings get ignored when they come from someone known for fairness and decency? James Garner was one of those rare Hollywood figures who seemed immune to the usual ego traps of fame. He wasn't flashy, didn't crave the spotlight beyond his roles, and always showed up, on time, prepared, and kind. From the smallest crew member to the most demanding director, Garner treated everyone with the same quiet respect. He had built a reputation not just as a talented actor but as a reliable human being in an industry often driven by personality clashes and power struggles. So when someone like James Garner chooses to speak about a co-star in anything less than glowing terms, it matters. Because he didn't speak often, and he didn't speak carelessly. The person he spoke about was Lauren Beall, a woman considered Hollywood royalty, a symbol of intelligence, class, and strength since she burst onto the screen opposite Humphrey Bogart in the 1940s. With her arched brows, husky voice, and unapologetic presence, Beall didn't just follow the rules of old Hollywood, she redefined them. Critics praised her boldness. Studios respected her ability to hold her own in a male-dominated industry. Fans adore her fearlessness, her independence, and her refusal to conform to the sweet, passive roles women were often forced into. She was, by all public appearances, untouchable. But as Garner would quietly reveal years later, that iconic presence came with a cost. One he personally experienced on the set of their 1981 film The Fan. On the surface, The Fan was just another psychological thriller, but behind the camera, the atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension. Garner, playing Beall's ex-husband in the film, found himself navigating more than just lines and blocking. The warm camaraderie and team spirit he was used to simply didn't exist on that set. Instead, there was a chill, an invisible force field surrounding Beall that kept others at a distance. She wasn't openly hostile. She didn't raise her voice or storm off set. But she controlled everything with such precision and intensity that people felt as if they had to tiptoe around her. Beall was meticulous, to a degree that many admired, until they had to work alongside her. She questioned scripts, overruled directors, and reshaped scenes in real time. She had a vision and expected it to be followed. And while some called it professionalism, others, like Garner, felt it was something deeper. Something that drained the room of ease and collaboration. He didn't fight her. He didn't argue. That wasn't his style. But those closest to the production could see his frustration. His usual light-hearted demeanor grew heavier. His silences spoke volumes. Years later, Garner would address the experience with measured words in his memoir, The Garner Files. He didn't lash out. He didn't use her name as a punching bag. Instead, he described their collaboration as difficult, calling her sharp, guarded, and condescending. He recalled how careful one had to be around her, how easily she dismissed others' input, and how exhausting it was to maintain harmony in her presence. It wasn't a complaint. It was a quiet truth, one that most people weren't ready to hear at the time. Why? Because Lauren Beall was a legend. She had spent decades building a public image so powerful, so polished, that any criticism felt like blasphemy. To question her was to challenge the myth she had so masterfully constructed. And Hollywood, like any other industry built on image, is slow to listen when those myths are gently probed by truth. Garner's remarks didn't make headlines. They didn't spark a wave of backlash or debate. They were simply noted, and largely forgotten. But then, other voices began to emerge. Quietly, and without fanfare, stories from other sets, other plays, and other productions started to echo Garner's sentiments. Directors who had once been proud to work with Beall admitted privately that it hadn't been easy. Actors, especially those new to the stage or screen, described how her presence could feel suffocating. Technicians spoke of the air changing when she entered a room, not because of awe, but because of tension. She didn't yell or belittle. But her standards were so rigid, her expectations so immovable, that even seasoned professionals felt diminished in her orbit. On Broadway, where Beall continued her career with the same commanding energy, similar patterns emerged. Creative differences with directors turned into outright clashes. Co-stars exited projects quietly, often citing scheduling conflicts, that insiders knew were code for something else. Some said it wasn't that she was unkind, it was that she was unrelenting. That working with her felt like always being evaluated and never quite measuring up. One anonymous performer described her as someone who made the air feel thinner, as if her very presence demanded so much focus and care that others forgot how to be themselves. Even her friendships, many of which were long-lasting and meaningful, showed signs of strain. It wasn't scandal or betrayal that ended them. It was exhaustion. Beall's sharpness, her constant need for control, and her critical eye could wear people down over time. What began as admiration slowly became distance. Not because people hated her, but because they didn't have the strength to keep up the emotional performance required to stay in her circle. In public, none of this was visible. Beall remained poised, articulate, and respected. She gave interviews that painted her as candid and wise, often speaking about the struggles of being a woman in a tough industry. But even in those moments, there was an undercurrent. Her empathy had limits. While she acknowledged her own challenges, she rarely gave equal weight to those of her peers. Her version of honesty was selective. It defended her choices, but sometimes dismissed the very real sacrifices others had made. With time, that flawless image began to develop cracks. Not because of a single scandal or a dramatic fall from grace, but through a slow accumulation of stories, perspectives, and observations that pointed to something more complex than the public had once believed. Film scholars began to reassess her career, noting both her groundbreaking achievements and the collateral damage they sometimes caused. Later appearances revealed a woman less engaged, more critical, and increasingly out of touch with the evolving world around her. She wasn't changing, and to some, that refusal felt like arrogance rather than strength. All the while, James Garner stayed quiet. He didn't repeat his remarks or escalate them. He had said what he needed to say. For him, it was never about taking down a legend. It was about sharing a truth that could help others understand the cost of working with someone so revered yet so difficult. His memoir didn't turn into a hit piece. It was simply a collection of reflections, and one of them happened to be about how even icons can make life hard for others behind the scenes. There's something powerful about that. Garner could have made a scene. He could have sold the story, named names, and stirred up headlines. But he chose the high road. He let his experience speak for itself, trusting that the truth, even spoken quietly, would eventually be heard. And it was. Slowly, through the testimonies of others, his words found validation. This isn't a story about tearing someone down. It's a story about the contrast between public image and private reality. About how someone can be both brilliant and difficult, admired and exhausting. Lauren Beall was not a villain. She was a woman who demanded excellence, who controlled her world with precision, and who struggled to accept anything less. But in doing so, she sometimes created environments that stifled rather than inspired. James Garner saw that, lived through it, and chose to speak with honesty instead of bitterness. His experience is a reminder of the quiet battles that unfold in creative spaces, the ones that never make the gossip columns but shape the lives of those involved. It tells us that behind every legend, there may be truths too uncomfortable to say aloud. And that sometimes, the people who say the least carry the most meaningful stories. As viewers, as fans, and as human beings, we're drawn to the shine of celebrity, the grace of iconic performances, and the legends built over time. But it's worth remembering that those legends are still people. Flawed, brilliant, difficult, kind, sometimes all at once. When someone like James Garner offers a measured warning, it's not a cry for attention. It's a moment of clarity from someone who lived it. So the next time you think of Hollywood legends, remember that their legacies are often more layered than we realize. And that the quiet voices, the ones that speak without malice, without drama, deserve to be heard just as clearly as the loud ones. Garner's story isn't a scandal. It's a lesson in listening, in nuance, and in the importance of recognizing the full picture, not just the polished parts. If you found this story as revealing and thought-provoking as we did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are always more untold stories waiting behind the scenes, and we'll be here to share them, one quiet truth at a time.